A bull, surrounded by ferocious tigers, begged a farmer for help. What he did shocked everyone. The sound that tore through the still morning air was unlike anything Jack Fletcher had heard in 30 years of working the land. It wasn't quite a bellow, wasn't quite a scream. It was something primal and desperate that made every hair on his neck stand straight up. He'd been checking the fence line near the northern boundary of his property in rural Queensland when that sound reached him, carried on the hot wind that swept across the paddocks. Jack froze mid-step, his worn work boot hovering above a tussock of dry grass, and listened. There it was again. Closer this time. A bull in distress, no doubt about it. But there was something else mixed in with that sound, a low, guttural snarling that didn't belong anywhere near his cattle station. Jack's weathered hand instinctively moved to the rifle slung across his back, fingers wrapping around the familiar stock. Whatever was happening beyond that rise wasn't good. He moved quickly despite his 58 years, boots pounding against the hard-packed earth as he crested the hill. What he saw in the gully below made his blood run cold. His prize Brahman bull, Magnus, 1,500 kilograms of muscle and horn, stood trapped in a dried creek bed, completely surrounded by 4 fully grown Bengal tigers. The great cats moved with lethal grace, circling their prey with tails twitching, eyes fixed with predatory focus. Jack's mind raced. Tigers, bloody tigers in Queensland. It made no sense, but there they were, as real as the sweat now soaking through his shirt. He'd heard reports on the news about exotic animals escaping from private collections, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The closest tiger sanctuary was 300 kilometers away, yet here stood 4 of the most dangerous predators on Earth, sizing up his most valuable bull. Magnus saw him. The bull's dark eyes locked onto Jack's face with an intensity that was almost human. The animal's massive head swung toward him, and in that moment, Jack understood what he was witnessing. The bull wasn't just making noise, he was calling for help. Deliberately, consciously. Magnus took 2 steps in Jack's direction, and the tigers immediately closed ranks, cutting off any escape route. The largest tiger, a magnificent male with stripes like burnt orange rivers flowing across his muscular frame, turned his attention toward Jack. Those amber eyes held no fear, only calculation. The cat was easily 200 kilograms of pure killing power, with canines that could crush bone and claws that could disembowel with a single swipe. Jack had faced dingoes, wild boars, even a saltwater crocodile once, but nothing like this. Magnus bellowed again, the sound reverberating through Jack's chest. The bull scraped his front hoof against the ground, sending up a small cloud of red dust. His sides heaved with exertion and fear, foam flecking at the corners of his mouth. The tigers had likely been stalking him for hours, wearing him down, waiting for exhaustion to make him vulnerable. It was classic big cat behavior, patient, methodical, deadly. Jack's hands were steady as he unslung his rifle, but his heart hammered against his ribs. 4 tigers. He had 5 rounds in the magazine. Even if his aim was perfect, even if he dropped one with each shot, he'd never get them all before they either fled or attacked. And these weren't just any animals. They were endangered species, protected by international law. Shooting one would bring every wildlife authority and conservation group in the country down on his head. Shooting 4 would likely land him in prison, but Magnus was his responsibility. The bull had been on Fletcher Station since birth, hand raised after his mother died from a snake bite. Jack had bottle-fed that calf through countless nights, nursed him through pneumonia when he was 6 months old, watched him grow into the magnificent animal he was today. Magnus had sired over 100 calves, his genetics spread through the entire herd. He was worth close to $50,000, sure, but he was more than that. He was family. The largest tiger took a step forward, muscles rippling beneath his striped coat. Magnus swung his massive horns in a wide arc, forcing the cat back, but the effort cost him. His back leg trembled, threatening to buckle. Blood ran from several deep gashes along his flanks where tiger claws had found their mark during earlier encounters. He wouldn't last much longer. Jack raised the rifle to his shoulder, sighting down the barrel at the big male. His finger rested on the trigger, applying just the faintest pressure. One shot, one clean shot to scare them off. But even as the thought formed, he knew it was wishful thinking. Tigers didn't scare easily. A warning shot might drive them back temporarily, or it might trigger an attack response. And if they attacked Magnus, the bull was finished. If they attacked him, they'd likely both die in this dried-up creek bed. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the gully into an oven. Flies buzzed around Magnus's wounds. The bull's breathing came in ragged gasps now, each exhale sounding more labored than the last. Time was running out. Jack had to make a decision, and he had to make it now. Every second of hesitation brought Magnus closer to death. A second tiger, a female slightly smaller than the male but no less dangerous, began moving to flank Magnus from the left. The coordination was beautiful and terrifying. These cats had hunted together before. They knew exactly what they were doing. Magnus tried to turn, to keep both predators in his line of sight, but the movement left his rear vulnerable. A third tiger immediately capitalized, darting forward with explosive speed. Jack's finger tightened on the trigger. The crack of the rifle shot echoed across the gully like thunder. Red dirt exploded 2 meters in front of the charging tiger, creating a small crater and sending up a spray of debris. The cat skidded to a halt, confusion replacing the predatory certainty in its eyes. All 4 tigers turned their attention to Jack now, and he felt the full weight of 8 amber eyes studying him, assessing this new element in their hunt. Magnus used the distraction. The bull surged forward with surprising speed for an animal his size, breaking through the gap where the startled tiger had retreated. But he only made it 3 meters before exhaustion won. His front legs buckled, sending him crashing to his knees in the dirt. He tried to rise, failed, tried again. The tigers began closing in once more, sensing victory within reach. Jack was already moving down the slope, rifle held ready, his voice rising in a loud yell meant to intimidate. He'd dealt with aggressive animals his whole life. The key was projecting absolute confidence, showing no fear even when your guts were churning with it. He shouted again, waving his free arm in broad, sweeping motions, making himself appear larger and more threatening. The tigers paused, uncertain. Humans were unpredictable, dangerous. These cats had clearly escaped from captivity recently enough that they still retained some wariness of people. But they were also desperately hungry, and Magnus represented more meat than they'd likely seen in days. The standoff stretched across seconds that felt like hours. Jack kept advancing, kept shouting, kept the rifle trained on the big male who seemed to be the pack leader. Magnus struggled to his feet again, using the momentary reprieve to regain his footing. Jack could see the intelligence in the bull's eyes, the understanding that his only chance at survival was staying close to the human. The animal took a shaky step toward Jack, then another. Blood dripped steadily from the gashes on his flanks, leaving a trail of dark spots in the red dirt. The tigers watched this movement with increasing agitation, their meal slowly slipping away. Jack kept descending, his boots sending small avalanches of loose stones rattling down the slope. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to maintain distance, to find higher ground. But Magnus needed him closer, needed the protection of human presence. The big male tiger let out a roar that seemed to shake the very air, a sound of frustration and warning. The other cats echoed the call, their voices creating a chorus of raw, primal fury that made Jack's legs weak. "Come on, mate! Come on, boy!" Jack's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through him. He was close enough now to see the whites of Magnus's eyes, to smell the coppery scent of blood mixed with the bull's fear sweat. "That's it! Keep moving toward me." The bull took another step, stumbled, caught himself. His breath came in harsh snorts, foam and blood mixed around his muzzle. One of his horns had been chipped during the confrontation, a fresh white scar against the dark curve. Jack could count at least 7 distinct claw marks across Magnus's hide, some shallow, others worryingly deep. The bull had fought hard, but he was spent. Jack's mobile phone was in his ute, parked half a kilometer away. No way to call for backup. No way to alert the wildlife authorities or get help from his neighbors. It was just him, one rifle with 4 rounds left, and 4 of the deadliest predators nature had ever designed. The odds were absolutely rubbish, and he knew it. The female tiger that had tried to flank Magnus earlier suddenly lunged forward. Not a full attack, just a testing strike, seeing if the human was all bluster or genuine threat. Jack swung the rifle toward her and fired. The shot hit the ground centimeters from her front paw, spraying her with stinging debris. She recoiled with a hiss, her ears flattening against her skull. 3 rounds left. Magnus had gained another 2 meters during the exchange. He was close enough now that Jack could reach out and touch him if he wanted. The bull positioned himself slightly behind Jack, using the human as a shield. It was remarkable behavior, showing a level of trust and understanding that Jack had never quite appreciated before. Magnus knew that Jack was his only hope, and he was betting everything on that knowledge. The big male tiger took several deliberate steps to the right, trying to circle around them. Jack pivoted, keeping the rifle pointed in the cat's direction. His back was exposed now, vulnerable to attack from the others. Sweat ran into his eyes, stinging, but he didn't dare wipe it away. The moment he showed any weakness, any distraction, they'd strike. He could feel the weight of their collective gaze, the predatory focus that missed nothing. A plan was forming in Jack's mind, risky and probably mad, but it was all he had. About 30 meters to his left, the creek bed widened into a small pool that still held water from the last rain. If he could get Magnus to that pool, if they could get into the water, it might buy them precious time. Tigers could swim, but they generally avoided it when hunting. The water would slow them down, make them more cautious. And more importantly, there was an old cattle track on the far side of that pool that led back up to higher ground. "All right, Magnus. New plan, mate," Jack spoke quietly, his voice meant to soothe both the bull and himself. "We're going to move sideways, nice and slow. Stay with me." He began moving laterally, keeping the rifle up, his eyes constantly scanning all 4 tigers. Magnus followed, his hooves scraping against stone. The bull was limping badly now, favoring his back right leg. Jack noticed fresh blood there too. One of the tigers had managed to rake his hamstring. If that tendon was severed, Magnus would never make it out of this gully. The tigers tracked their movement, but didn't immediately follow. They seemed confused by this new tactic. The big male's tail lashed back and forth, a sign of mounting frustration. He roared again, and this time Jack roared back, a wordless shout of defiance that surprised even himself. For a moment, just a moment, the human and the tiger locked eyes in a battle of wills as old as time itself. Another tiger, one that had hung back until now, suddenly charged from the right. Jack's reaction was pure instinct. He swung the rifle and fired without consciously aiming. The shot went wide, but close enough that the tiger veered off, crashing into a pile of bleached driftwood with a snarl of anger. 2 rounds left. They were 10 meters from the water now. Jack could see sunlight glinting off its murky surface, see the reeds growing along the edges. It looked like salvation, though he knew it was just another temporary refuge. The tigers were spreading out wider now, trying to surround them completely. Smart. Too bloody smart. Jack quickened his pace, and Magnus struggled to keep up, each step clearly causing the bull agony. 5 meters from the water, the female made her move. She came in low and fast, a streak of orange and black fury aimed directly at Magnus's exposed hindquarters. Jack spun, knowing he was too slow, knowing he couldn't stop her in time. The rifle came up, his finger already squeezing the trigger, but Magnus was faster. The bull pivoted despite his injuries and swung his massive head like a club. His horn connected with the tiger's shoulder mid-leap, sending her tumbling sideways with a screech of pain and surprise. Jack didn't waste the opening. He grabbed Magnus's ear, pulling the bull forward with all his strength, while simultaneously backing toward the water. His boots hit the edge of the pool, mud squelching under his heels. He kept pulling, and Magnus followed, trusting completely now. They splashed into the water together, the sudden coolness a shock after the oppressive heat. The water came up to Jack's thighs, to Magnus's chest. The bull's breathing was ragged, desperate, but the water seemed to revive him slightly. Jack positioned himself between Magnus and the bank, rifle raised, ready for the inevitable attack. The tigers gathered at the water's edge, pacing, snarling, clearly unhappy with this development, but not yet willing to commit to entering the pool. The injured female limped slightly as she joined the others. Good. Maybe that would make them more cautious. Jack used the moment to assess Magnus more carefully. The bull's wounds were serious, but probably not fatal if he could get treatment soon. The biggest danger was shock and blood loss. Magnus was trembling now, whether from fear, pain, or cold. Jack couldn't tell. "Just a bit further, mate," Jack murmured, beginning to move backwards through the water toward the far bank. "We're almost out of this mess." But even as he said it, he knew they weren't out of anything yet. The tigers were regrouping, their hunting instincts overriding their caution. The big male took a tentative step into the water, testing it. When nothing bad happened, he took another step, then another. The others watched, waiting to see if their leader would commit. 1 round left in the rifle, and 4 tigers who'd just realized the water wasn't going to stop them. Jack's mind raced through possibilities, each one more desperate than the last. The cattle track was still 15 meters away across the pool, and Magnus was moving slower with each step. The water seemed to be sapping what little strength the bull had left. The big male tiger was now chest-deep in the pool, moving with surprising grace despite the resistance of the water. The other 3 were following his lead, forming a loose semicircle that would soon become a closing net. Then Jack heard it, the distant thrum of an engine. A vehicle, maybe more than one, coming from the direction of his property. Hope flared in his chest before logic crushed it. Even if help was coming, they'd never arrive in time. The tigers would reach them in less than a minute. But that sound gave him an idea, mad and reckless, but possibly their only chance. Jack raised the rifle above his head with both hands and fired the last round straight up into the air. The crack echoed across the gully, amplified by the natural bowl shape of the land. The tigers flinched but didn't retreat. They'd grown accustomed to the noise, learned it wasn't directly dangerous to them, but Jack wasn't done. He began screaming at the top of his lungs, a continuous roar of noise designed to carry as far as possible. "Here, down in the creek! Tigers, bring weapons!" He repeated it over and over, his voice growing hoarse but never stopping. Magnus seemed to understand and added his own bellow to the cacophony. The combined noise of human and bull created an unholy racket that bounced off the gully walls. The tigers hesitated, their instincts warning them that this much noise might attract other predators or humans, but hunger and the proximity of their prey kept them advancing. The big male was only 5 meters away now, close enough that Jack could see the individual whiskers on his muzzle, the old scars crisscrossing his face from previous battles. This wasn't just any tiger. This was an experienced killer who'd survived in the wild before captivity and after escape. Jack's empty rifle was nothing more than a club now, useful perhaps for one strike before those jaws closed around his throat. Magnus pressed against Jack's side, the bull's massive weight helping to anchor them both in the water. Jack could feel the animal's heart thundering through his hide, could smell the metallic tang of blood mixing with the muddy water around them. The bull's trust was absolute, heartbreaking in its simplicity. He'd placed his entire life in Jack's hands, and Jack was about to let him down. Then salvation arrived in the most unexpected form. The engine noise Jack had heard earlier suddenly exploded into multiple engines, and over the lip of the gully appeared not one vehicle but four. Jack's neighbors, Tom Reynolds, Bill McCarthy, Sarah Chen from the adjacent property, and Jack's own son, Daniel, who must have been visiting. They'd clearly heard the rifle shots and come to investigate. What they saw when they crested that rise made them all freeze for a split second. "Dad!" Daniel's voice cracked with panic and disbelief, but these were bush people, raised around danger, trained by harsh land to act first and process later. Tom already had his own rifle out. Bill was grabbing a spotlight from his truck despite the bright daylight, and Sarah was on her mobile, hopefully calling wildlife authorities. Daniel scrambled down the slope with the reckless speed of youth, his own rifle swinging from his shoulder. The tigers sensed the shift immediately. The odds had changed catastrophically from their perspective. Where there had been one human with an empty weapon, now there were multiple humans with multiple weapons. The big male stopped his advance, his ears swiveling toward the new arrivals. The female who'd been injured earlier was already backing toward the far bank, her predatory confidence evaporating. Tom's rifle cracked twice in rapid succession. He wasn't shooting at the tigers, but creating a wall of splashes in the water between them and Jack. Bill hit them with the spotlight, the sudden intense beam in their eyes, confusing and frightening. Daniel reached the water's edge and waded in without hesitation, positioning himself between his father and the nearest tiger. "We're coming, Dad. Hold on." The tigers were breaking now, their coordinated hunt dissolving into individual retreat. The big male held his ground longest, those amber eyes locked on Magnus with pure predatory regret. So close. The kill had been so close, but even his considerable courage had limits. When Tom's next shot hit the water barely a meter from his head, the great cat finally turned and powered through the water toward the opposite bank. Within 30 seconds, all four tigers had retreated from the pool, vanishing into the scrub on the far side of the gully. They weren't gone. Jack could still hear them moving through the bush, could catch glimpses of orange and black between the trees. But they'd given up on Magnus, at least for now. The risk had become too great. Daniel reached Jack and immediately put his arm around him, helping support both his father and the bull. Tom and Bill waded in from the other side, creating a protective formation around Magnus. Sarah remained on the bank, her rifle trained on the scrub where the tigers had disappeared, ready to provide covering fire if they returned. "Jesus, Dad, tigers, bloody tigers!" Daniel's voice shook slightly. "Long story, mate." Jack's legs were trembling now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. "Let's just get Magnus out of here." Moving the injured bull across the pool and up the cattle track took the combined effort of all four of them. Magnus tried to help, tried to keep moving, but his strength was nearly gone. They had to half-carry, half-drag him through the water and up the muddy slope. Every step was agony for the bull, visible in the way he flinched, in the sounds of distress that came from deep in his chest. Tom's ute was the biggest, and they managed to get Magnus into the tray, though it took all of them pushing and pulling while the bull used his last reserves of energy to help. Once he was loaded, Magnus simply collapsed, his sides heaving like bellows. Jack climbed in beside him, pressing his hands against the worst of the wounds to slow the bleeding. "Sarah, you get through to anyone," Jack called out. "Wildlife services are on their way. Should be here in 20 minutes. Sarah kept her eyes on the scrub. "I also called Matt Morrison. He's bringing tranquilizer equipment." Matt Morrison was a vet who specialized in large animals and sometimes helped wildlife authorities with dangerous animal situations. If anyone could safely deal with 4 escaped tigers, it would be Matt and his team. But right now, Jack's only concern was Magnus. Bill drove while Tom rode in the tray with Jack, keeping watch. Daniel followed in Jack's ute, and Sarah brought up the rear, still keeping her rifle ready. They formed a convoy heading back toward Jack's homestead, leaving the creek bed behind. Jack looked back once and saw movement in the scrub. orange and black shapes pacing, watching, waiting. The tigers hadn't given up entirely. They'd just learned that this particular prey was too well protected. Magnus's breathing was labored but steady. Jack kept pressure on the wounds, his hands covered in blood, talking constantly to the bull in a low, soothing voice. "You did good, mate. So bloody good. Stayed strong, called for help, fought when you needed to. You're gonna be all right. The vet will fix you up proper. Few weeks rest, good feed, you'll be back to your old self." Whether Magnus understood the words or just the tone, Jack couldn't say. But the bull's eye, the one Jack could see, swiveled to look at him. There was something in that gaze, recognition, gratitude, trust. Jack had answered Magnus's call for help, had put his own life at risk to save him. That bond, forged in terror and blood in a dried creek bed, would never break. The homestead came into view, and Jack could see his wife Helen standing on the porch, her hand shading her eyes as she watched their approach. She'd know something was wrong from the speed they were traveling, from the convoy formation. As they pulled into the yard, she ran toward them, and when she saw Magnus in the truck bed, saw the blood covering Jack, her face went pale. "Jack Fletcher, what in God's name have you done?" Jack looked at his wife, at his son, at his neighbors who'd dropped everything to help, at Magnus lying injured but alive in the truck bed. What had he done? He'd done what any decent person would do. He'd answered a call for help. Matt Morrison arrived 15 minutes later, his ute loaded with veterinary equipment and 2 assistants. He took one look at Magnus and immediately started issuing orders. Within minutes, they'd set up a makeshift treatment area in Jack's barn, laying out sterile drapes and organizing medical supplies with practiced efficiency. Magnus was too heavy to move again, so they brought everything to him in the truck bed. "This is bad, Jack. Really bad." Matt's hands moved with precision as he examined the wounds, his face grim. "But I've seen worse. He's lost a fair bit of blood, and these lacerations need proper cleaning and suturing. That hamstring's partially torn, but not severed. Lucky break there." Matt worked for nearly 2 hours while Jack, Helen, and Daniel watched. The vet cleaned each wound thoroughly, picking out dirt and debris, checking for signs of infection. He administered antibiotics, pain relief, and fluids through an IV line. The worst gash, a deep slice along Magnus's ribcage, required 23 stitches. Through it all, Magnus remained remarkably still, as if understanding that these humans were trying to help. Wildlife authorities arrived as Matt was finishing up. 3 officers in official vehicles, along with a specialist team equipped with tranquilizer guns and tracking equipment. The senior officer, a woman named Janet Price, whom Jack recognized from previous encounters with problem wildlife, looked thoroughly gobsmacked when he explained what had happened. 4 Bengal tigers in Queensland, attacking your bull. She repeated it as if saying it aloud might make it make more sense. "Jack, mate, that's absolutely mental. Tell me about it." Jack was exhausted now, the adrenaline completely gone, leaving him hollow and shaky. "Any idea where they came from?" Janet pulled out a tablet and showed him news reports he'd missed while dealing with Magnus. A private exotic animal facility 3 states over had been devastated by storms 2 weeks earlier. Several animals had escaped, including 4 Bengal tigers from their breeding program. There'd been scattered sightings across hundreds of kilometers, but nothing confirmed until now. They've been moving at night, avoiding people, hunting whatever they could find, Janet explained. "Your bull was probably just in the wrong place at wrong time. We've got teams coming in from 3 states to help with the capture. This is a massive operation." "They're endangered, yeah?" Jack asked, already knowing the answer. "Critically, every single one of these tigers is precious. We need to take them alive if at all possible." She looked at him carefully. "I know they nearly killed your bull. I know you had every right to shoot them. But the fact you didn't, the fact you found another way, Jack, that's remarkable." Jack didn't feel remarkable. He felt knackered and worried and slightly sick when he thought about how close they'd all come to dying. But as he looked at Magnus, now resting more comfortably with medication, helping manage the pain, he knew he'd made the right choice. Both the bull and the tigers would live. That had to count for something. The wildlife team set up a command post on Jack's property with his permission. Over the next 3 days, using drones, camera traps, and traditional tracking methods, they located all 4 tigers. The capture operation was tense and dangerous, but ultimately successful. Each tiger was tranquilized, examined, and transported to a proper facility equipped to house them. The big male that had led the hunt against Magnus turned out to be a valuable breeding animal, one of only a few hundred of his kind left in the world. News of Jack's confrontation with the tigers spread faster than a bushfire in drought season. Television crews showed up at his gate. Reporters called at all hours. The story had everything: danger, drama, split-second decisions, and an outcome that saved both domestic and endangered animals. Jack became briefly famous, though he hated every minute of the attention. "I just did what needed doing," he told every reporter, every interviewer, every curious person who asked. Magnus called for help. I answered. End of story, but it wasn't the end of the story, not really. Magnus recovered slowly but steadily over the following weeks. The wounds healed into impressive scars that the bull seemed almost proud of, standing taller when other cattle approached to inspect them. His temperament changed slightly. He was more alert now, more protective of the herd, as if his experience had given him a deeper understanding of danger. The bond between Jack and Magnus strengthened into something extraordinary. The bull would seek out Jack specifically when the herd was brought in, would follow him around the yards like an oversized dog. When Jack worked in the paddocks, Magnus often positioned himself nearby, as if standing guard. The other cattle noticed and began to treat Magnus differently too, showing him a deference that went beyond his size and strength. 3 months after the incident, Jack received a letter from the Wildlife Conservation Organization managing the tigers' new facility. Inside was a photo of all 4 tigers, healthy and thriving in their new enclosure, along with a certificate of appreciation for his role in their rescue. But what struck Jack most was the handwritten note at the bottom. Your choice to protect both your bull and these endangered animals, despite the danger to yourself, exemplifies the best of human compassion. The big male tiger, whom we've named Fletcher in your honor, has already successfully sired cubs. Your actions that day didn't just save 4 tigers, they potentially saved dozens of their descendants. Thank you. Jack pinned the certificate to the wall of his office, next to photos of Magnus through the years. Helen caught him staring at it one evening, a cuppa going cold in his hands. You all right, love? She slipped an arm around his waist. Just thinking about that day, how close it was, how differently it could have gone. He shook his head. If the others hadn't shown up when they did. But they did. And you kept Magnus alive until they got there. You made impossible choices under impossible circumstances, and everyone survived. Helen squeezed him gently. That's something to be proud of. Jack thought about the moment Magnus had looked at him across that gully, eyes pleading for help, about the decision to walk down into danger rather than away from it, about the feel of the bull pressing against him in the water, trusting completely, about 4 magnificent predators who'd only been doing what their instincts demanded, about neighbors who'd come running at the sound of trouble, about second chances and impossible odds and the thin line between tragedy and miracle. Yeah, he finally said, taking a sip of cold tea and not caring. Yeah, reckon it is. Daniel started bringing his own kids around more often after that, wanting them to meet Magnus, to hear the story firsthand from their grandfather. Jack would take them out to the paddock where Magnus grazed, and the great bull would lumber over, allowing the children to touch his scarred hide, to feel the power beneath the gentleness. Did you really fight tigers, Grandpa? his youngest granddaughter asked, her eyes wide. Not fight them, sweetheart. Just stood between them and something they wanted. Sometimes that's all you can do. Stand your ground and hope for the best. The story became part of Fletcher Station's history, told and retold around dinner tables and at local pubs. It grew slightly in the telling, as stories do, but the core remained true. A farmer heard his bull calling for help and answered that call. Despite the danger, 4 tigers lived because of compassion rather than fear, and a bond was forged between human and animal that transcended the normal relationship between farmer and livestock. Magnus lived another 8 years after the tiger attack, siring dozens more calves, his genetics spreading throughout the district. When he finally passed from old age, standing in his favorite paddock with the late afternoon sun warming his scarred hide, half the district turned up for the burial. They planted a red gum over his grave, and Jack commissioned a small brass plaque, Magnus, warrior, survivor, friend, the bull who knew to ask for help. On quiet evenings, Jack sometimes walked out to that tree and stood there, remembering the fear and the courage, the desperation and the hope, the moment when everything hung in balance, remembering 4 striped shadows moving through water and a bull's trust that never wavered, and the sound of engines bringing salvation over a hill. The wildlife organization sent updates every year on Fletcher the tiger and his growing family. Each one included photos, and Jack noticed the same quality in the big cat's eyes that he'd seen that day in the gully. Fierce intelligence, survival instinct, and perhaps, just perhaps, a memory of the human who could have killed him but chose differently. Some stories end with victory or defeat, triumph or tragedy. This one ended with scars that healed, lessons that lasted, and lives that continued because when faced with an impossible choice, one man decided that all life, domestic and wild, valuable and endangered, deserved a chance. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough.